Bonjour, my name is Marie Carrière and I am a professor at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Papaschase, and Métis. I am also past director of the Canadian Literature Centre, Centre de Literatur Canadienne, and that research centre and I have been good friends and collaborators with the Canadian Studies Centre at the University of Innsbruck over the years. I am delighted to present here a bit about my research and thank Professor Ursula Mathis-Moser for the invitation. My past and ongoing research has focused on comparative Canadian literature, feminist theory, and ethics. My first monograph is Writing in the Feminine in French and English Canada. It brings together the experimental writing of 5 women authors from French and English Canada and their dialogue with feminist, deconstructive, and psychoanalytic theory and philosophies of alterity and ethics. I've also tackled minority literatures in Canada and Quebec and the trope of melancholia in several journal articles, book chapters, and edited collections, including 2 works co-edited with Professor Moser, Writing Beyond the End Times, Écrire au-delà de la fin des temps, and more recently, All the Feels, Affect and Writing in Canada, Tous les sens, Affect et écriture au Canada. My second monograph, M'aider protéiforme, looks at the contemporary rewritings by women playwrights and novelists and their feminist adaptations of the infanticidal myth of Medea, especially her roots in Euripidean tragedy. This work proposes close analyses of the mythopoetics of this complex story of exile, racialization, and motherhood, and its philosophical questioning of freedom and agency. A culmination of these long-standing interests appeared recently in a 3rd monograph, Cautiously Hopeful, Metafeminist Practices in Canada. A term coined by Laurie Saint-Martin, metafeminism is a reading methodology that I develop in this work to understand and bring together contemporary practices as both recalling and extending past feminist aesthetics and politics, hence the meta quality of the genealogy of feminist thought and practice. This book brings together seemingly disparate writings by Anglo-Canadian, Indigenous, and Québécois women authors. It also familiarizes readers with major streams of feminist thought, including intersectionality, affect theory, and care ethics. And so I thought I would read from a few select passages of Cautiously Hopeful to present the major argument of this book with the following introduction. When I began to think about metafeminism as a possible paradigm to consider contemporary forms of feminist literary practice, notions of growth and revitalization were not at the forefront of my mind. Instead, I saw the ambivalences, paradoxes, and conflicts within feminism, with the multi-directional nature of the prefix meta seemed to denote. For some time, feminism represented for me an uncomfortable space of both the culminations and the insufficiencies of the feminisms of decades past. This is so, I think, for a lot of Western women, especially other Generation X women who came to feminism through mostly academia and faced almost from the beginning ambivalence between pessimism and optimism, indifference and engagement, and other seemingly irresolvable tensions around political and theoretical effectiveness and agency. Yet, recent years have been ripe with feminist reawakenings. Among them, the #MeToo movement sheds light on the pervasiveness of sexual assault and harassment. Black Lives Matter fights racial and colonial violence, and Idle No More calls for Indigenous sovereignty and environmental protection. And so my aim is to address the multiplicity, internal dissonances, and differences of feminist thought and writing practices, to think about what critic Misha Kafka called at the start of this millennium, the innumerable ways of doing feminism, about a feminism that may have moved well beyond the mother term, already fractured at its origins, but without sounding the death knell of feminism. This, to me, is a tremendously important observation. When I asked my then 16-year-old daughter, C, what feminism meant to her, her reply was immediate and enlightening. I'm all about feminism, but I won't spend my entire life thinking about it. Seeing my worried expression, she added, feminism is good, though. Kafka and C drive home the need for a term like metafeminism to denote perhaps the only fundamental truth about feminism, that it has no single beginning, no single definition, no single end, and thus no single history. But metafeminism is also a forceful reminder that the internal differences defining feminist thought today need not be considered only in negative, neoconservative, fraught, and ultimately anti-feminist terms. And so from this ambivalence springs an openness, from which in turn springs the possibility, indeed the affect of hope, and the reason why it figures in the book title. Feminism also fuels my continued but cautious hope in the possibility of social justice and transformation, and such hope directly connects to how I understand metafeminism. As Rebecca Solnit points out, hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. Like metafeminism, hope is a sort of in-betweenness. At this point in time, feminist practitioners need to take stock of feminism's past, present, and unknown futures. We need to understand how these temporalities are neither mutually exclusive nor linear, but interconnected. And so, in sum, as its prefix denotes, and in keeping with Saint-Martin's original use of the term, metafeminism highlights those cultural, and more specifically in my study here, literary, practices that contain some less familiar or more expansive tropes, as if to say, voilà, c'est moi, in new and sometimes unexpected ways. Intersectional analysis, feminist allyship, affect poetics, and care ethics reveal the play between encompassing and surpassing feminist practices that are both familiar and less so to Western readers. Metafeminism is very much about feminism, its multifarious expressions, its reach and elasticity, and the work that it both does and still needs to do. And so, at the time of writing, I am a feminist setting out to decipher and depict the internal and external plurality of feminism, as well as the sometimes messy, paradoxic meta-dimension and meta-consciousness of feminism today and its fundamental intervention in our neoliberal, late capitalist, unevenly globalized, patriarchal, colonial, and androcentric times. If disorder has always been an underlying tension of feminism, metafeminism creates critical space and terminology to transform it into an always intersectional praxis that remains self-aware of its past, present, and future incarnations. Thank you for listening.